Something a bit different this episode, an interview with me from June 2023's KidLit Summer Camp. But don't be fooled, everything we discuss applies to all categories and all genres. Hello, I'm Stuart Wakefield, an author accelerator, certified book coach and writer. With 26 years in theatre, broadcast media and coaching under my belt, I know what makes stories work, and I love to share that with other writers because the world of storytelling, it's like the ocean. It's deep, it's mysterious, and it's a little bit scary to those who don't know how to navigate it. And with so much left to luck and timing, it's my mission to give great books the best chance of getting into readers' hands. In each episode, I'll share tips and plans of action that will help you write, edit, and publish your book. And if you're new to writing or consciously working to improve your craft, then this is the podcast for you. In June 2023, Sara Gentry from Solutions for Writers invited me for an interview at KidLit Summer Camp. Despite not being a KidLit Book Coach myself, I agreed. After all, many writing techniques span many genres and categories, and that's why I'm sharing this interview with you. During our discussion, we talk about how theatrical techniques can improve writing, especially for character building, and we really get to the heart of the struggles writers can face, even beyond the work itself.
Welcome, KidLit campers. I'm really excited to bring to you Stuart Wakefield today. Stuart comes to us with a background in theater, and he's an all-around lovely human. So I am excited to introduce you all to him, and I'll start with his bio. Stuart is an author accelerator, certified book coach, and writer. With 26 years in theater, broadcast media, and coaching under his belt, he has a visceral understanding of what makes story work. He has an MA distinction in professional writing, and his debut novel, Body of Water, was one of 10 books longlisted for the Polari First Book Prize. His latest novel, Behind the Scenes, won a 2021 Book Life Fiction Prize contest semifinalist. He's currently studying a second MA degree in writing for script and screen, and his first TV show is airing on the UK's Channel 4 in 2023. Welcome, Stuart.
Thank you very much for having me. Hello, everyone.
So I thought it would be really interesting to talk with Stuart about how theater kind of influenced his writing and coaching experience, because there's so much character work and so many interesting ways to approach story from the theater. So maybe before we do that, we should get a little background information about how you came to theater. If you want to talk a little bit about your background with that.
Sure. I came to theatre through Grease, the movie. So I was 6 years old. And I don't think I'd actually seen the movie at this point, because I think it might have been, I can't remember how watered down Grease the movie is compared to the stage show, because the stage show is a bit more adult. Anyway, yes. I was certainly obsessed with the song Grease Lightning. And it was coming up to Christmas, and our school was having a talent show. And I decided I would build a robot, because I'm also a big science fiction fan. Would build a robot and call it Grease Lightning, just as an excuse for me to be able to get up on stage and sing the song. And that was my introduction to standing in front of a room full of people, being a show pony, being applauded, and then getting all of that lovely endorphins and feel-good chemicals pumping around my body. And I didn't really look back.
That is so interesting. That's fantastic.
I know it's random.
It's not often that you hear somebody getting into theater through science.
yeah, exactly. It was just showing off.
Yeah. So since then, since the Grease Lightning days, what else have you done, like with theater and drama and things like that?
Okay. So I always did theater through school. I did it for, exams. So I got qualified in a few things there. But I then transitioned into art. So when I left school, I went to art school. And I actually specialized in fashion design. So although my fashion design degree didn't kind of work out, I kind of stayed with the theatre. It was kind of my fallback as I went into full-time work with companies such as Ford Motor Company and Warner Media. I was always doing that theatre work in the background. So I have played many characters. I often was cast as teenagers, and generally teenagers with mental health needs in comedies. So yeah, but they were difficult characters to make funny. Mm-hmm. But I seemed to kind of find a way through that and navigate it quite well. I've also played Queen Elizabeth I's Lady in Waiting, but I had a shaved head. The idea was that we were kind of going for that Sinead O'Connor look. Yep. If you don't know who Sinead O'Connor is, just have a look on YouTube. She has this very ethereal bald head. I've done all sorts of things. I played Prince Charming in a non-fairy tale version. It was quite a serious version. I've played rugby players. All just a really, really diverse set of characters, which I think kind of looking back has really helped me.
And somewhere in all of this, you somehow got into writing. So yes. When did that happen for you, like in relationship to all of that?
Okay, so just like backing up a little bit. So as well as acting, I also trained to be a director. So in the mid-90s, I started directing, and then it kind of flipped backwards and forwards between the two. But I was very conscious that there's a lot more going on than the actors and the director. So because I had a love of fashion, I was studying theatre costume design. So I started, when I wasn't directly involved in a show as an actor or a director, I would design costume. I would also design sets. And then just out of curiosity, I rigged lights once, and you'll see that if you have a look on my Instagram stories. I worked on a music video and worked on lighting and stuff like that. So I've always been very curious about all the different things that kind of fit together. And out of that, I think something happened to me, and I wasn't very well. I had some mental health needs. I had a breakdown. I went into hospital for a week. I was on kind of medicated recovery for another 5 weeks. And then I kind of went into counseling, which is not the usual thing in the UK. I think for us in the UK, we think every American has a counselor or a therapist. It's not something that kind of happens too much in the UK. So that was quite interesting to be able to talk about that with other people. So that was in 2003. And as a result of that breakdown, I could not get back on stage. I tried, I couldn't get through scenes. And the director I was working with, and it was a very intense play called Closer, which they ended up making into a movie. And she just pulled me aside after one rehearsal and said, how are you feeling? And I just said, I can't do this. It's too much. It's going to make me ill again. So I stepped away and never went back to the theatre and didn't do anything creative for 6 years. And by 2009, I was crawling the walls. It was, I just didn't really know what to do. So I just lost all of my creative confidence. So I heard about National Novel Writing Month. So that's the challenge of writing 50,000 words in 1 month. And just thought, what have I got to lose? I did write when I was at school. I would do like little side projects and give them to my English teacher. And I remember that she said to me one day, when I kind of graduated, she said, keep writing, it's good for you. So, but I didn't really kind of take that into kind of consideration. It wasn't something that I practiced. So when I started National Novel Writing Month, I mean, I didn't know what I was doing, but it was very freeing. And there was no expectation. I knew that nobody was going to read it. And it was like playing. And I was able to reconnect with being characters.
Yeah.
But I had to be all of them. I also had to be the director, the costume designer, the set designer. Can you see where I'm going here? I had to make decisions about lighting. I even got to control the weather. So it was being totally in control after a period where I felt like I had no control at all.
Yeah, that is incredible. And testament to you as a person, a testament to the lovely people who were like watching out for you during that time.
Yeah.
And also just an example of how good you are at story, because that was riveting. I know you're not necessarily trying in telling your backstory there, but that was an incredible story. And so, you mentioned that you get to wear all the hats as a novelist.
Yes.
How did that make you feel? Was it a weird thing to sort of wrap your head around after being in a field where you're focused on, one specific task?
Yes. And I think it was the collaboration that I missed. So, it is working in a theatre is hugely collaborative. Okay. So you're not only, if you're an actor, you are looking at the text on the page. You are looking for subtext. You need to create a character that is fully three-dimensional, that is bigger than the words that are on the page, because you have maybe 90 minutes, probably 2 hours tops of dialogue. You might not be in every scene. You might be in all the scenes. So there is that you're constantly bouncing ideas off each other. The director has a vision. Even the lighting people have a vision. We're all trying to riff off what the director's vision is. Okay.
Right.
And that may or may not jive with what the writer wrote. So for me, that collaboration is, you're bouncing ideas off each other. You might improvise a scene. Another actor might do something you don't necessarily expect. So you have to try and piece those two things together. And, I might have a view on something that another actor does and say, okay, this isn't reading right for me. So do you need to make the adjustment, or do I? What if we play this scene this way? What if we play it that way? I'll give you an example. So when I first learned to direct, there were 4 of us on the course, and we were each given a short play that had been written by the writers who were doing training at that theatre as well. And, we didn't know the actors. They just came around and auditioned for all 4 of us. And then, we started rehearsals. And when we put my play on, I could call it my play, the play I was directing, we put it on, it was set in a park. And it was a group of people going on walks each day, and they would meet and have a conversation. Okay. So very simple. So the show went up, and this chap came up afterwards and was talking to me about the play. And he said, "Oh, it's really funny." And I said, "Oh, thank you. We worked on that." And then he went a bit quiet and he said, "I didn't write it like that."
Oh.
And I was like, "Oh." And I was waiting for that reaction. Like, how protective was he going to be? And he seemed very pleased. And, I think it had opened up something to him. So you're constantly making these decisions. And what I will say is that, as a writer, you kind of have to let go, because once your story is out in the world, it's not yours anymore. And people are going to take different things from that. So yeah, for me, it was the collaboration and the collaborative problem solving that I really missed.
Well, that will speak well to those in this audience here who are writing picture books, because in the picture book space, you write a text and then it's given to an illustrator, and you may never speak with that illustrator ever about that project. And then you just wait until that book comes out and you see what they've done with the text that you've given them. And the stories I often hear are just that people are blown away by different interpretation or, you know, a different style maybe than they were anticipating, but it usually comes out all right.
Yes. I mean, I volunteer at my local library, and I grew up reading comics. You know, and I still read comics, if I'm honest.
Yes.
So, you know, where we sit is right next to the kids section. So, you know, we're always like looking through picture books because we're so close to the section. The kids will come and talk to us. You know, what new books do you have? You know, obviously we'll have, you know, kids of color who are looking for books that reflect them. And it's fascinating to see the variety of picture books that are out there. And, you know, I think it's easy to there was one recently I read, it was self-published. And personally, I didn't think the text worked with the illustrations. So I think, again, you know, it would be great if writers could have that collaboration with an illustrator. But again, I think there is that sense of letting go. And I don't want to get into narrative theory.
Sure.
Okay? But the message you put down on the page is not necessarily the message that somebody else picks up.
Right.
And you only have so much control over that.
Yeah, that's well said. Yeah. So let's shift gears a little bit, because clearly, like, the format of a play is much different than the format of a book in a sense. And yet they're kind of the same, because you're still telling a story with a beginning, middle, and end. Yes. And I'm just kind of curious how your acting experience and screenwriting experience and things like that have informed the process of writing a book.
So for me, I think for obvious reasons, character is key. So I've heard different variations of this, but to me, plot and character equals story. Okay. You can't have one without either of the other two. Okay. And the example I use is, if you put Jane Eyre into Tomb Raider, you're going to have a very different story. And another good example of this is Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. Okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, plot cannot exist on its own, and neither can character. You know, we reveal character through their thoughts if we're novelists. And I think this is a luxury that writers have, in that they can get into that internal monologue on the page, and they can show that to a reader. And an actor doesn't have the facility to do that. They can only say the words that are already on the page. And unless an actor is facing the audience and does their monologue to the audience and explains how they feel, that's fine. You know, right. But the audience aren't going to have anything else to go on. I love the movie Clueless because Alicia Silverstone's character Cher has a voiceover throughout most of it. So you know exactly what's going on in her head as well as what she's saying or doing. And there's a good juxtaposition, because the way she is around the character Josh, or the other guy that she likes, I can't remember his name. He looks like a 50s movie star.
Christian?
Yes, that's it. Your fellow fan.
Yes.
You get to see that juxtaposition of what Cher is saying and doing compared to what's going on in her head, because she's told you what's going on in her head. So, so character is king. The other thing that you don't have to rely on is what we call theater of the mind. So you can have a blank stage with 3 spotlights, creating 3 separate pools of light. And with the right sound effects, you can make each of those pools of light be a completely different location. And theatre audiences will accept that. they're much better at suspending their sense of disbelief. Whereas readers need this information. They need to be oriented in time and space. You know, some of them are going to be, particularly concerned with, I don't know what a character might be wearing, because that's what they're into, when they pick up a book. So readers are looking for different things. And again, you can't really control that. I think as long as you know who your ideal reader is, you can make a pretty good stab at, pushing all of their buttons. But somebody somewhere is going to pick up a book by you that isn't your intended reader.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, they're gonna go off at a tangent, like I'm doing now. But I think, remind me what your question was.
No, I
improvised myself into a corner.
This is all very interesting. I'm just curious how you find the two mediums to be different and how they can inform one another. But you also are going to have to make choices, like this example of the suspension of belief. I would never have thought about before, but it's true. I've seen like one-man show or something where all it is an actor on stage. There's no setting. There's no props. There's like nothing on the thing, right?
Yeah.
Mimes, right?
Right.
It's like we get sucked in without really needing to know those details. And yet if we give that same experience on the page in a book, that book is probably being returned to the library, right? Without having been read. Yes
and no. It's interesting what you can get away with as a writer. So, for example, and I guess this doesn't necessarily relate to your picture book so much, but I was at a book signing, not my own, and I can't remember the author, but I remember two people who were getting their books signed said to him, "You never described your main character." And they said, "Okay." He said, "Well, okay, you describe the main character to me. Like, what do you think they look like?" And without knowing, they both described themselves. So that you can get away with some things, but I think that's a bit of an art. But yeah, I mean, for me, all of my character work stuff comes into my writing. I think I had 32 characters in behind the scenes, and I worked hard to make them distinct from each other. And it's amplifying characteristics about the different ones, or giving them a particular style of speech, or commenting on the way somebody flicks their ponytail as opposed to somebody who rubs the top of their head when they get nervous. It's picking up on those little, tics and those things that make you remember people. And I think when you are creating characters as writers, the people that you remember them for a reason. And I think a lot of novels and books and even movies, you might forget the plot, but if the characters are good, they will stay with you.
Yeah, they start to feel like friends.
Yeah,
right?
And I think this is where a lot of fan fiction comes from.
Yeah, people just aren't ready to let go of interacting with that character. That makes a lot of sense. I would think that you would have an advantage because of your acting experience. I know actors are taught to really get into the mind of the character in order to portray them. So I would think that you would have an advantage in that way.
I'd like to think so. So I recently wrote a novelette. So it's 15,000 words. And it was about two men in the big die-up, or the Great Die-up in the Great Plains in 1886. And I was very, very keen on making sure I got the narration right. And I wanted it. And you kind of start with the kind of Wild West movies that you saw on TV.
Yeah.
And then gradually, I went onto YouTube. I started watching, videos of people who, obviously I can't get video of people in 1886, but then, you can start to read things. You can start to get a feel for the accents, what the Wild West or Old West, whatever you want to call it, accent was like. And then, because some of it's quite Irish, some of the American accent. And now I kind of understand why the Americans have such an affinity with Ireland.
It's because we're very self-centered people.
but no, there is that, and you think about all those different influences from all of those people that came into what is now the United States. So yeah, it was very, very keen on getting that because it was written in first person, is getting that narration right.
Yep.
And then separating one character from the other. So one was very gruff. He was like, he owned the ranch. He was and the other guy was basically snowed in with him. So looking at, okay, well, how would they have been educated? How would a rancher, what was the style? Like, would they ever talk about their emotions, or would it just be one or two words response to somebody trying to make conversation with them? So he was trying to make them similar because they were both from the Old West, but distinct enough to look at that. So for me, it was a case of getting it all down in terms of the story, a good idea of the narration style, and then going back and fine-tuning.
Oh, that's so interesting. So you're also a book coach.
I am.
And are there any tips or tricks you use with clients who might be having a hard time getting into character more deeply? Is there any strategies that you like to use?
Yes. So I would definitely look at any books on Konstantin Stanislavski's acting system. And I did.
Okay, we're going to have to link to that. That's a mouthful.
Yeah. So yeah, Stanislavski, and there was another one, Lee somebody, but they both kind of brought realism to the cinema. So when you start to see Montgomery Clift, James Dean, he was in Streetcar Named Desire.
Oh, is that Marlon Brando?
Marlon Brando. Okay, yeah. So they were kind of like the new wave of realism in terms of acting, and they would go to these acting schools, and they were taught different ways of getting into character. So a few examples are like physical action, where you're trying to describe someone's emotional reaction without speaking. So again, I mentioned a character who rubs his head when he's upset. That's how he calms himself down. Because there's only so much shrugging and eye rolling a reader can take, right?
Especially in the YA space.
Right. Yes. And the he says and she says, and that constant kind of pattern, because it starts to get a bit bitty on the page, and your experience of reading, because you are looking at text on a page, and humans are great at looking for patterns. Yeah. So if you start to constantly have he said, she said, they said, it said at the end of dialogue, we kind of get distracted and we're snapped out of what we call the fictive dream and end up looking at what is now text on a page rather than being in the story. So we definitely look at that. If somebody has been running, go out and run if you can. And then you're better to able to understand that kind of dry hoarseness in the back of your throat, the way your heart is pumping. Your fingers might tingle. You can get a better sense of that. So again, that's one of the things that he used to do. And then there was sense memory, which is thinking about smells and touch and taste. And you might remember for example, your grandmother's casserole. And those smells can snap you back into a memory. So I think, again, if you're trying to describe somebody in a room with somebody they love who's cooking, think about those things, and it will kind of snap you back into that emotional state. And a lot of actors use that to really hook into different emotions. And then emotional memory is also very good. So you might be writing about grief, but you might be lucky enough to have not experienced grief. But how do you then write it? Because you don't have that distinct thing. And what I like to do is break those emotions down into its component parts. So loss, anger, loneliness, regret, all of those different things. If you haven't experienced any of those things, you have led a charmed life, right? So again, you can break the feeling of grief down, just as an example, into all these different component parts. You know what those feel like, and you can put those back together and create a believable sense of grief for a character. I didn't want to be too morbid about that. So yeah, that's one of the things that I really kind of work with clients when they're looking at character or haven't quite got a handle on either character or what readers want from a character.
Yeah. This is so fascinating. I feel like I could keep talking about things, but I am conscious of the time. And thank you so much. And we will have all these links and ways to connect with you on your website and social media and all the things. But is there any way in particular that we can support you?
I would say have a podcast. If you
That's right. It's a fabulous podcast. I totally forgot to mention that. Yes.
Thank you. It's called Master Fiction Writing. There's always an accompanying blog post that goes with that. So you could have a listen to that. I don't make the episodes too long. They're kind of 15, 20 minutes because I don't like to listen to them personally. And then, yeah, I guess it's just kind of that really. It's I'm more about kind of helping you guys than you are in helping me. So, have a look at the blog, have a look at the podcast, see what resonates most with you, and then go do those things.
Well, thank you so very much, and thank you, campers. As you can tell, Stuart is a wealth of resources here, especially with character development and all the things. So thank you so much for your time and for joining us. And thanks. We'll see you guys later.
Very welcome. Thank you. Bye, everyone. Before I wrap up, I invite you to do all the usual stuff. You know the drill. Like, review, share, and subscribe. But better than all of that, come and visit me at thebookcoach.co. You can sign up for my free self-editing guide and take a look at the services I provide. But there's tons, and I mean tons of free useful stuff on my blog too. And there we have it. Whatever you took away from this interview, I want you to think carefully about the book you're planning or the manuscript you're revising. How three-dimensional are your characters? And if you find them lacking, what can you do to help them jump off the page? We'll be back to normal programming next week. Until then, happy writing. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I'm conscious there are a lot of podcasts out there, and I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to listen to mine. But also, well done for investing some time in your own writing life. And yes, this podcast is about writing, but I'm here for you, not just your stories.